The Iran-Iraq War, a conflict etched in blood and fire, remains a stark reminder of the human cost of geopolitical ambition. This war, often overshadowed by other global conflicts, was a brutal and devastating chapter in the history of the Middle East, leaving scars that are still felt today. Spanning 8 harrowing years, from 1980 to 1988, this war engulfed 2 pivotal Middle Eastern nations in a bitter struggle for dominance. The sheer scale of the conflict, with its relentless battles and immense human suffering, is a testament to the ferocity with which both sides fought.
The seeds of conflict were sown in a complex web of historical grievances, ideological clashes, and a struggle for regional supremacy. The animosity between Iran and Iraq was not a sudden eruption, but a culmination of years of tension and rivalry, exacerbated by the shifting political landscapes of the time. At the heart of this maelstrom lay a volatile mix of territorial disputes, religious tensions, and the personal ambitions of 2 powerful leaders, Saddam Hussein of Iraq and Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran. Their contrasting visions for the future of the region set the stage for a confrontation that would engulf millions.
Hussein, a ruthless dictator, sought to exploit Iran's post-revolutionary chaos and establish Iraq as the dominant power in the Persian Gulf. His ambitions were not merely territorial, but also ideological, as he aimed to position Iraq as a leader in the Arab world. Khomeini, the spiritual leader of the Islamic Republic, viewed Hussein's secular Arab nationalist regime as a threat to his vision of an Islamic state. For Khomeini, the war was not just a defense of Iran's borders, but a holy struggle to protect and propagate the principles of the Islamic Revolution.
The fuse was lit on September 22, 1980, when Iraqi forces launched a surprise attack on Iran, marking the beginning of a conflict that would claim hundreds of thousands of lives and leave an indelible mark on the region. The initial invasion saw rapid advances, but the anticipated quick victory eluded Iraq. The invasion, initially met with stiff resistance from Iranian forces, quickly bogged down into a bloody stalemate characterized by trench warfare, chemical weapons attacks, and a complete disregard for human life. The use of chemical weapons in particular highlighted the brutal nature of the conflict and the lengths to which both sides would go to achieve their aims.
As the war raged on, it became increasingly clear that this was not simply a border dispute, but a clash of ideologies and a struggle for regional hegemony with global implications. The prolonged nature of the conflict drained both nations' resources and inflicted untold suffering on their populations. The international community watched in horror as the conflict escalated, drawing in regional and global powers and threatening the fragile stability of the Middle East. The war's impact extended far beyond the battlefield, influencing global oil markets, international diplomacy, and the geopolitical landscape of the region for decades to come.
The early years of the Iran-Iraq War were marked by a series of aggressive Iraqi offensives aimed at capturing key Iranian territories and delivering a swift knockout blow. The Iraqi military, equipped with modern tanks and advanced weaponry, launched a series of coordinated attacks, hoping to quickly overwhelm Iranian defenses and secure a decisive victory. Saddam Hussein, emboldened by his country's superior military hardware and fueled by dreams of regional dominance, believed that a quick victory was within reach. He envisioned himself as a powerful leader who could reshape the Middle East, and he was confident that his well-equipped forces would easily crush the Iranian resistance.
However, he grossly underestimated the resolve of the Iranian people and the tenacity of their armed forces. The Iranian soldiers, driven by a deep sense of patriotism and religious duty, were determined to defend their homeland at all costs. They quickly mobilized, transforming their initial shock into a fierce and unyielding resistance. Despite being caught off guard by the initial Iraqi assault, Iran mounted a fierce defense, drawing on a vast pool of revolutionary guards and volunteers willing to fight for their faith and homeland. These volunteers, many of whom were young and inexperienced, were motivated by a powerful sense of duty and a willingness to sacrifice everything for their country.
The battlefields stretching across the rugged terrain of the Iran-Iraq border became a nightmarish tableau of trench warfare, human wave attacks, and relentless artillery barrages. The harsh and unforgiving landscape added to the brutality of the conflict, as both sides struggled to gain any meaningful ground. As the conflict dragged on, the initial Iraqi momentum stalled, and the war settled into a bloody stalemate. The once rapid advances slowed to a crawl, and both armies found themselves locked in a grueling and seemingly endless struggle.
Neither side was able to gain a decisive advantage, and the fighting devolved into a war of attrition that would grind on for years. The soldiers, exhausted and demoralized, faced the harsh realities of a conflict with no clear end in sight. The trenches became their homes, and the constant threat of death and injury loomed over them every day. The international community, caught between condemning Iraq's aggression and containing the potential spread of Iran's Islamic Revolution, struggled to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Diplomatic efforts were hampered by the complex geopolitical landscape, and protests against the war echoed around the world, highlighting the global desire for peace.
Despite the horrors unfolding on the battlefield, both sides remained locked in a deadly embrace, unwilling to back down or seek a negotiated settlement. The relentless combat, marked by brutal close-quarters fighting and devastating explosions, continued to claim countless lives. The war had become an existential struggle, fueled by national pride, religious fervor, and the personal ambitions of two implacable leaders. The flags of both nations, symbols of their respective causes, flew over the battlefields, while soldiers carried religious symbols as talismans of protection and inspiration. The leaders, entrenched in their positions, refused to concede, ensuring that the conflict would rage on with no end in sight.
The Iran-Iraq War, initially a regional conflict, gradually drew in global powers, transforming it into a proxy war that reflected the broader geopolitical tensions of the Cold War era.
The United States, wary of Iran's Islamic Revolution and its potential to destabilize the region, tilted towards Iraq, providing Saddam Hussein's regime with intelligence, logistical support, and, controversially, dual-use technology that could be used for military purposes. The Soviet Union, while maintaining a neutral stance, also provided arms and aid to Iraq, seeing an opportunity to counter American influence in the region.
This influx of weapons and support from both sides only served to prolong the conflict and escalate the bloodshed. The involvement of superpowers in the Iran-Iraq War highlighted the complex web of alliances and rivalries that characterized the Cold War. It also underscored the strategic importance of the Persian Gulf region, home to vast oil reserves, as a key battleground in the global struggle for power and influence.
As the war raged on, the international community grew increasingly concerned about the potential for the conflict to spill over into neighboring countries, disrupt global oil supplies, and draw the superpowers into a direct confrontation. The specter of a wider war loomed large, threatening to engulf the entire region in flames.
In a desperate attempt to break the stalemate and cripple Iran's economy, Saddam Hussein resorted to targeting oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. This marked a significant escalation in the conflict, as the Gulf was a crucial artery for global oil supplies. The decision to attack oil tankers was not just a military strategy, but a calculated move to disrupt Iran's oil exports, which were vital for funding their war efforts. The Gulf, already a tense region, became a battleground for control over these essential resources. This aggressive tactic ignited what became known as the Tanker War, a brutal and destructive phase of the Iran-Iraq conflict that saw unprecedented levels of maritime violence.
This phase of the conflict, lasting from 1984 to 1987, saw both sides relentlessly attack oil tankers and shipping lanes. The aim was clear: to cripple their adversaries' ability to export oil and finance the war effort. The Gulf waters turned into a perilous zone, with burning tankers and damaged shipping lanes becoming a common sight. The relentless attacks caused significant damage to the oil infrastructure, further intensifying the economic strain on both nations. The strategic targeting of oil facilities and tankers was a double-edged sword. While it aimed to weaken the enemy, it also led to a dramatic reduction in oil exports, affecting global markets and economies far beyond the Middle East. The tanker war had far-reaching consequences, disrupting global oil supplies, driving up prices, and sending shockwaves through the international community. The volatility in oil prices had a ripple effect, impacting everything from transportation costs to the price of goods worldwide. The international community watched with growing concern as the conflict escalated. Stock markets reacted with volatility, and nations scrambled to secure their energy supplies. International summits were convened to address the crisis, highlighting the global dependency on Middle Eastern oil.
Fearful of an escalation that could threaten their own energy security, Western powers, led by the United States, decided to intervene. The stakes were high, and the potential for a broader conflict loomed large. Western powers, led by the United States, increased their naval presence in the Gulf. This show of force was intended to protect the vital shipping lanes and ensure the continued flow of oil to global markets. The U.S. Navy and its allies began escorting oil tankers through the perilous waters, providing protection against potential attacks. These convoys became a lifeline for the global economy, ensuring that oil could still reach its destinations despite the ongoing conflict. The sight of oil tankers under naval escort became a common one in the Gulf. Military ships patrolled the waters, ready to respond to any threat, while the tankers they protected carried the lifeblood of the global economy. This intervention, while intended to safeguard international shipping and deter further attacks, also risked drawing Western nations deeper into the conflict. The presence of foreign navies added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. The increased military presence was not without controversy. Protests erupted against Western intervention, and the risk of naval standoffs and miscalculations grew. The Gulf region became a tinderbox, with the potential for a larger conflict always on the horizon.
The downing of an Iranian civilian airliner by a U.S. Navy warship in 1988 was a tragic mistake that claimed the lives of all 290 passengers and crew. This incident underscored the high stakes and the ever-present danger of miscalculation in the volatile Gulf region. The tragedy of Iran Air Flight 655 brought the human cost of the conflict into sharp focus. Grieving families and memorials for the victims served as a stark reminder of the perils of war and the devastating impact of errors in judgment. The incident highlighted the intense pressure and split-second decisions faced by military personnel in the Gulf. The volatile environment made every operation fraught with risk, and the potential for further tragedies loomed large.
The tanker war had a devastating impact on both Iran and Iraq, further crippling their economies and exacerbating the human suffering inflicted by the conflict. The destruction of oil infrastructure and the loss of revenue deepened the economic crisis in both countries. The human toll was immense. Civilians caught in the crossfire faced unimaginable hardships, with many losing their homes and livelihoods. Refugee camps swelled as people fled the violence, seeking safety and stability. The tanker war also highlighted the global implications of regional conflicts, particularly in strategically important regions like the Persian Gulf. The intersection of vital resources and international trade routes meant that local conflicts could have far-reaching consequences. The narrow straits and busy shipping lanes of the Persian Gulf became a focal point for international attention. The conflict underscored the interconnectedness of the global economy and the vulnerability of critical supply chains to regional instability.